replay viewers.
I know, right? Every time I use Zoom to go live on Facebook, I'm like, are we live? Are we live? I don't know what to do. Are we live?
Are we there yet? Can you hear me now?
It takes like 30 seconds. Oh, here's Facebook catching up with us.
Awesome. Well, Heather, I see we're live.
Okay, we are definitely live. So there's no one with us yet. So let's both take the opportunity to share this post, because I know you said you wanted to share it in places, and I'm going to share it as well.
And in the meantime, we should probably mention who we are for our lovely replay viewers. I'm here with Heather Wright from Savvy Agent, and she is both savvy and an agent. You want to tell us a little bit more about yourself? Thanks.
Yes. Hi, I'm Heather with Savvy Agent, and this is my very special guest, Dara. She is here today, and I probably say her name wrong. I blame the fact that I'm American and she's Canadian, and there's just sometimes there's just a difference in how we speak. And so she's so gracious with me on that, and she does not mind how I say her name. So Dara, thank you so much for joining us. Feel free to pronounce your name properly and tell everybody who you are and why you know so much about SEO and why we should listen to you about it.
Sounds great. So I totally stuck my hand up when Heather said that she was looking for someone to come and talk to agents about SEO, because magically, the business that I've been running since 2005 has been optimizing real estate agent websites and making sure that realtors are found online for more than just their name, because it's easy enough to be found for your name, unless maybe you're John Smith. But typically any agent should be found for their name. But what about the name of the city you work in or the farm area that you serve? And so I made it my mission to help agents be found for more generic search terms, because that's where new business comes from. They already know your name. It's not necessarily new business, but if they're looking for you online, you want to be found for something that they wouldn't have otherwise found you for. So the moment that I heard that Heather was looking for someone to come and talk to her audience about this, I totally volunteered, because I know a lot. I used to teach SEO to small business people locally here in Vancouver, Canada. And I've also used those skills that I was teaching to actually create dozens and dozens of websites for agents that show up on page one, as well as instruct them, probably hundreds of others, on what they can be doing to better optimize their websites and their web presence, because it's not just about websites, as you'll discover when we get going here on our little list of things to talk about. And my name is pronounced Dara. It's a long list. My name is pronounced Dara, if anybody wants to try that, but I also answer to Dara or Dara. So however you call my name, I'll probably respond. Some people usually will go and just relegate themselves to calling me D, but I'm around. I like having a relatively unique name, because then it's easy to track me down.
So if I channel my inner Fran Drescher from The Nanny, Dara, then that's like the only way I can say it correctly, which is not cool at all. So thank you for, for letting your American friend butcher your name. You can call me Heater.
As long as I don't call you heathen.
Well, I am a heathen most times. So, it would just be honest. So the thing that I have realized, so I intended to have, and actually I've practically forgotten my intention, because when you start talking about SEO with somebody who knows as much as Dara knows, you find yourself going down a rabbit hole very quickly. So she knows so much. Dara, I'm so impressed with how much you know, that there might be moments where I kind of glass over, like, what are you talking about? Because, it's nice to have friends who are smarter than you, and that is definitely you in this case. But there might also be times where I say, okay, well, let's dumb it down for the crowd here, just because
rein me in.
Know what the expert level is going to be here, and we don't want people to give up on us because maybe they have no idea what we're talking about, and it might be super advanced. So we might have to, specify like at what level of knowledge that you're at, or what level of SEO expert you consider yourself. And honestly, by the time this call is over, you guys can probably all consider yourself experts, because you'll have learned a ton about SEO.
I think the primary thing is actually not to give up on yourself before you even get started. it seems when you're learning something that's completely new and completely fresh, it can seem really intimidating to learn some new terminology. But the reality is, and I'm going to explain it as simply as possible, not to dumb it down, but actually just to say, we experience SEO every day in our online travels, and maybe we just don't realize it. And so drawing your attention to the things you actually are seeing, that you're actually interacting with, that you just maybe have never labeled as SEO, is probably going to help you realize now you're going to see the internet with fresh eyes. And then you can see your own situation with those new eyes. So I wanted to start by we talked about what we wanted to address at the outset, which is what in the world is SEO. And if I can go on that tangent. Okay, so SEO stands for Search Engine Optimization. And it's a big umbrella. It's an umbrella that goes over a whole bunch of things that you do online, because it is most times described as what you're doing to your website. However, it also has to do with optimizing anything that people search for. So search engine being Google, and I'm going to use Google as the search engine I'll refer to as I give examples. But when you go and you search any search engine, it could be YouTube, it could be Facebook, all of these platforms that allow us to type words, doesn't have to be keywords, words into a search bar, all of those are allowing you to perform a search. And the best thing that you can do, and this is that, like, maybe this will shift and change how you see your web presence, your social media presence, and everyone else's, is that it has everything to do with how you present yourself and what words you've used to describe yourself. So I was recently working with a commercial real estate broker. And most of the time I work with residential realtors. This guy happens to be a commercial broker, and he had a Google listing. And the Google listing was just his first and his last name. And as I said right when we started, like, if someone is searching for you by name, they're going to find you. So that wasn't the thing that he needed to optimize. He would be found for his name if somebody typed it into the search bar. What he was missing was the descriptor of the city he worked in and the service that he provided. So suddenly we added Vancouver commercial real estate broker. Those are 4 really powerful words when someone is searching for a service such as that. And suddenly now he is showing up on page 1 for that search because he added those words. So it can sometimes be as simple as just describing yourself and describing your business with the words that someone might be searching for. So to me, that's the foundation of SEO. Was that good entry-level explanation?
No, it was good. Yes. So I was going to ask you if you had words, I mean, the 4 words that you recommended that your the agent in Vancouver used, is that what you would recommend that everybody start with? Or
that's a really great question, because the actual answer is, don't everybody go using all the same words as each other. Right. So you actually want to do a little recon, and there are keyword research tools, and you can go and hire SEO experts who will do elaborate exploration as to what search terms are ranking well and which ones you have the best chance at. And what I would like to suggest to your audience is actually just start simple. Start with the first terms that pop into your mind if you were searching, or go and ask 10 of your favorite customers in hopes that 3 or 5 of them will answer, and ask them, what would you search for on Google or on wherever it is that you would search? And just ask them the question without giving them the answer, because those are the words that people want to, that you would want to be found for. And here's a really great example of why you might want to ask somebody outside of your industry. As agents, we use the term listings, right? Mm-hmm. So you guys use, I have a new listing. But does any Joe Schmo who's buying or selling a house describe their home for sale as a listing? Probably
only if
not.
They've been hanging out with the real estate agent for a little bit.
Exactly. So listings is not a great keyword for search engine optimization. It could be one of them, but it's not necessarily where you would go and start. So what I'll come back and answer your question, but I did want to go on that tangent and say, if everybody was going after the same words, then we would be having a bigger issue, because the more people who are targeting a particular search term or a set of search terms, the more diluted that becomes and the harder it becomes to rank at the top of the search results for that term. So actually being different is good, And I've got some great examples on how to be different, because we'll talk about farm areas versus cities in a little bit. But start with something. Pick something that makes sense to you that is more than just your name and your brokerage. And actually, the brokerage is another great descriptor, because if I drove by your sign and I was like, oh, I don't remember her name, but I remember it was Heather and I remember it was Remax and I know I'm in Des Moines, and I Googled Heather Remax Des Moines, you want to make sure that your site will come up when someone searches that term, or your Facebook page, or whatever presence you have online.
Exactly, because I don't want those other bitches named Heather getting my lead. Okay, cool. So I know you said you wanted to come back to this, and I know what you want to come back to is very much more advanced, but let's just break it down a little tiny bit. So if your mom is looking for a house for sale, and she doesn't want to tell you she's looking for a house for sale, she's probably going to go to Google and probably going to type in house for sale in Des Moines, for example. And that's a decent place to start. But if you are, and actually, when you were going through your explanation of things, it made me think, oh, if I sell houses in Beaverdale, that would be a better descriptor to use than Des Moines. And if I sell bungalows in Beaverdale, then that would be even better than homes or ranch homes. So being specific is going to help you be unique. And I mean, if everybody is optimized for homes for sale in Des Moines, then nobody's going to be really, it's the same. So no one's going to get noticed.
And the thing is that you've hit the nail on the head with those variations, whether it's a specific MLS neighborhood, whether it's a particular type of home. And the thing is that you don't have to only target those. You could actually have some variety within your site, where maybe you have one page on your site that is actually called Homes for Sale in Des Moines. And then you have, what was it? Beaverdale. Beaverdale. That's an interesting.
Yeah. So you take Beaver Avenue to get to Beaverdale, and Beaver connects to Lower Beaver. And then if you go visit my friend Tom in a town about 15 minutes away, there's Little Beaver Road.
Let's say Beaver seven more times.
Probably a bad word on Facebook by now.
But you're very right. And then you could have a page that addressed the different types of properties that one might search for in Beaverdale, for example. But what it also makes me think of is what your mom would search for would be very different than what someone who is maybe in their 30s would search for. And that's another great reason for us to identify who you're working for, or who might be buying the kinds of properties that are for sale, and therefore what they might be searching for. So there's another consideration there.
And I always say,
so
know your audience.
What I said a moment ago was not to go too pro on doing keyword research, to just start somewhere. And frozen. I hope I haven't frozen. Oh, there we go. Okay. I thought you were just holding really still for a second. So it may have,
I'm playing the mannequin challenge.
Hopefully it's not me. But what I was going to say was that one of the things that you can do that's super simple is just go to Google and do a search. So go to Google, and I'm going to use Des Moines because we're using you as the example. But if you searched Des Moines real estate for sale, and then you searched Beaverdale real estate for sale, when you look at the total number of results for a particular search, that is a huge indicator of how easy it's going to be to get to the top of those search results if you're trying to. So if I can use Vancouver, where I live, as an example, because I know, for example, there might be actually, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but if you go and do those searches, you're going to see that probably 10% or there's a 10% or less search result volume. So what it means is you're competing with that many fewer people, because probably nobody is thinking, I'm going to target Beaverdale exclusively with my website. But when I talked about my success in building websites for realtors, I've built dozens and dozens of farm area websites because they're so easy to optimize to get them to the top of Google for something that's really specific. And we talked about this in preparation with the call, so I don't want to forget to mention it, which is when you're offering something specific and someone has searched for something specific, the likelihood of you capturing a lead or you building a relationship with that person and eventually, having a transaction that leads somewhere with them is so much higher than when they've gone and searched for something generic and you've shown up for something generic.
Mm-hmm. Right. The problem, okay, so we're talking about websites a little bit, and I promised our watchers that we'd give them some free ways of doing it. So before we get super deep into the websites, because you could argue that some people might pay for a website that gives them a little bit more flexibility than their broker site, but a free way is through your Google listing, right? So you have is it Google My Business? Is that the technical?
I think so. Yeah, they keep changing the name of it, so I'm pretty sure it's Google My Business.
Yeah, so it's some sort of listing on Google for your business. If you were
free listing,
Google, what is the free listing on Google for my business? It will come up. So would you recommend, if I sell in Beaverdale, would you recommend that I include that in my Google listing, which is a free listing and will help me not only show up on Google results, but also in the Google map? And so you would say, put Beaverdale in my listing.
So what I would say is, and because we're using this as a specific example, but presumably those watching have their own specific examples, what I would say is Google, let's say Google Des Moines real estate or Des Moines homes for sale or something, the first instinct, Google that thing and check and see who shows up in the Google business listings. Well, and then go and Google.
So I've done that, and actually there's no business listings. So I Googled Des Moines homes for sale, and there's 1.9 million results, and they're all big brokers. Of course, there's the ads that show up at the top. They're the big aggregate websites like the portals that everyone loves, Zillow, Trulia, Realtor.com. So there's no real people that show up here. But maybe
to me that shows an opportunity. So this is why I said the very first thing to do would be to Google it, because if nobody is showing up as the business with that from that search, and you think it's a good search term, then I would submit a listing for those words. So I wouldn't start small with Beaverdale. I would start bigger to see, because if there's a gap in the Google My Business search like answers, then I think you have an opportunity to add yourself specifically to that.
So it looks like you now have to click on the map to see the business listings.
Okay.
And I wonder if that's specific to real estate because people like to make people in real estate pay for everything, because there's so many listings that it doesn't make sense to show 3. I don't know. Because then when I Google Des Moines real estate, it's 16.6 million results come up versus Beaverdale homes for sale is 317,000.
Yeah, look at that huge difference. So could you imagine how few people are making any efforts to show up for that? So if Beaverdale was an area that you were known or that you served, then absolutely go and submit yourself. And you can have more than one business listing. You have to have a physical address when you have these listings, so you can put down your broker address. But the words that you choose for the name of your business, which are typically just your name or your name plus brokerage, but this is the opportunity, the free opportunity to add in some other terminology, some other words that will then help you be found for something other than your name, which is what we started talking about at the beginning, because ideally you're looking to capture people who don't know you yet and to get to know, who can get to know you.
I love it. I love it.
I have a feeling you'll be submitting a couple of listings.
I will, but so you have to have an address in that neighborhood, don't you?
No, not in the neighborhood, because it's just a keyword. So you could say, Beaverdale Realtor, Wright and Associates, or whatever your team name is, and then your pin doesn't have to be in that neighborhood, like where the pin on the map drops. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, because when I look at the map on because still no business listings show up under Beaverdale homes for sale, but then when I look at the map where the business listings showed up under Des Moines real estate, it's just like your regular map where actually Iowa Realty shows up there, which is where I started selling real estate but no longer work there. So
yeah, we'll play around with it, and so you have to have a Google account in order to do this. I want to make that clear. And the other thing that I want to mention is definitely don't forget which Google account you've used to set up your Google listing, because I have seen a lot of agents who over the years at some point someone somewhere set something up for them and now they don't have access to edit it if a phone number or a website changes. So definitely, or even their brokerage, because I'm sure
Yeah. Well, because
brokerage.
it actually took me a couple of years to get my business listing changed from Iowa Realty to Remax, because I used my Iowa Realty email, which is dumb. Use your own personal email. If you normally use your broker's email, use your own personal email, because you never know if you're going to leave that brokerage or not. And so it's smart business to own those things yourself. And it took a long time. I think I had to, I don't know, Google has a tendency to just be difficult to work with in general. So it could have been me as user error making it more difficult. It could have been Google. I think they changed things a couple of times, like maybe your listing was just sort of lost if you lost your password. But then one day, a year or so ago, I was able to get it back. So if you have ever had the problem that I'm describing, try again, because maybe it will work for you. But definitely don't use your broker's email on your Google listing, because it's your business, not theirs.
Yeah. And so definitely, if you're setting this up for the first time, take good care to take note of your login information, because it's going to be something that you'll be glad that you stored away for future use when you get to that point. Now,
Exactly.
we also touched on, in preparation for this call, we also talked about Facebook pages. And a Facebook page is another perfect opportunity to not just use your name. And I'm not talking about your personal profile. I'm talking about your business page. And the business page doesn't have to be some super active thing. It can actually just be a page that represents your business, but use keywords for the city that you work in, and use some more descriptors, because interestingly, I do a lot of like website assessments, and the number one thing that I notice, and this is website or any kind of web presence, the number one thing I notice is that the agent doesn't think to tell people what city they serve. So I just went to someone's site yesterday, and it comes up and it's beautiful, and there's, the imagery is, and everything looks pro and slick, and all this, it's got his name in the corner. It doesn't have a phone number, so I don't even see the area code, and it doesn't say what city or province or country or anything he's serving. And it jumped off the page at me because I'm used to looking for that. But
Sure.
If you, in your web presence, and comes right back down to like search engine optimization, all you're trying to do is you're trying to help Google or Facebook or YouTube or whomever. You're trying to help them by telling them who you are and where you are in the world. Because if they don't know that, then they can't deliver you as a result to someone's search.
Okay.
And that's the most fundamental thing, that anybody's taking anything away.
Okay, cool. So we've got a couple of questions.
Awesome.
It looks like we may have been slightly confusing. So I apologize for that, but SEO is kind of tough to get. So Monica wants to know, hi Monica, by the way. So Monica says, should all of our listings start with home for sale in ... Monica Cuevas? So explain how keywords work. Like, you don't have to say home for sale on every keyword, right?
No. If I was, now, where is it that she's, I can still answer this question, but I'm not sure where she's posting this terminology. And what I would do, if she's online and has an answer to that, just so I can answer this a little bit more accurately, but what my instinctive response is, change it up. It's not always a home for sale. Sometimes it's a house, sometimes a townhouse, sometimes it's a condo, sometimes you want to call it a home. You could change up and call it a property. So if you have the opportunity to use a variety of terms, depending on where it is you're posting this, then I would do that. I would not only ever use one search term, because what you're doing is you're like casting a fish hook into the sea, and you don't know which lure is going to be the one that catches the fish. So you have to keep trying.
So Monica is, so she specified that the Google listing, for the Google business listing. So you want to have your basics in there. You want to have your name, your broker's name, all of the cities that you serve. Or do you want to have
at least one, at least the primary one?
And then would you do, I guess that is probably her question here now that I'm saying it out loud.
Okay.
So you want to have a Google listing for each city or each neighborhood that you serve, or is one enough?
If you can get away with having a different listing with a different set of keywords related to your business, if you can get away with it, I'm not sure, but let's say you had, let's say you were in a particular city that had several suburbs and you happen to serve all of them. If you could have a listing for each of those, then that's all the more fish hooks out in the sea for Google to deliver that response.
Okay. And so if homes for sale in blank city that's the big general term that honestly a lot of people might actually search for that. So would you say, Monica from brokerage serving, your real estate expert on all homes for sale in Beaverdale, Johnston. Sorry, Monica, I just moved you to Des Moines.
And actually, now I understand what you're saying, that her question was specific to the Google listing, and I wasn't clear on that. So yeah, I mean, what you want to do is you want to go into Google My Business and submit the first and primary listing that you absolutely can't do without. And once that's accepted, go in and try and add a secondary one, because you wouldn't want to start with, let's say, Beaverdale if what you really wanted was Des Moines,
right?
In case for whatever reason it prevents you from adding more than one listing. Because it's a free listing, and so you're kind of gaming the system a little bit by submitting yourself multiple times. But because the opportunity is there to be listed and just show up on the map like that, I think it's worth trying for.
So I just did a little search engine search myself, and it says the maximum number of listings per account you can have is 100 listings created prior to October 2017. So you can create and own any number of listings. Okay, so it used to be before October 2017, you could only have 100 listings, but now there's no maximum limit for listings. So it looks like you can have, according to the Google search that I came up with.
And something to consider, though, is that you're verifying by phone number. They'll sometimes send a postcard to the address to confirm your listing. So there's a few hoops you have to jump through. Mm-hmm. And my concern with the same person or agent having multiple listings is if you're using one of those methods for verification, either your address or the phone number, that it might catch that duplication. And that's why I say start with the one you absolutely can't do without, and then branch out. I don't see any reason not to go ahead and say either homes for sale and the name of the person and the brokerage and the city. But you could also try realtor as one of the keywords. Like, people are often looking for a realtor, not just a home for sale. Like, there's no wrong answer is the thing. The wrong answer is everyone doing the same thing. Because if everyone did homes for sale or everyone did realtor, then you would all create so much competition that it would be really difficult to show up at all, because there's only so many spots in the top rankings. And that's when people start having to pay for search engine optimization from third parties, because now it's this, what do they call it, the red ocean, where it's just lots of competition. Right. I was just about to say something and it has escaped me.
Well, we have a follow-up question.
Okay, great.
Where do we add the different keywords? And so we should probably explain that keywords are really just words. They're
just words. It's just the words that help explain what it is that you do. And where would you add those keywords? In your business name. So they're going to say, what's your business name? And I used the example earlier of the commercial real estate broker. So it was his first and last name that he used exclusively. And we changed it to commercial real estate broker Vancouver, and then his name. And you could do before or after, but we added those words to his business name, which previously were just his name.
So really a keyword is just the phrase or words that somebody would type into Google to complete their search. So real estate agent in Des Moines, realtor in Santa Monica, homes for sale in Beaverdale, house for sale on 123 Main Street,
exactly.
So I probably wouldn't optimize that. But so Google is also, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Dara, but Google is smarter than it used to be, in that it used to be you had to have that exact phrase to show up in those search results. But now if you say homes for sale Des Moines, so if you leave out the in, then Google still counts that the same exact as homes for sale in Des Moines.
Totally.
Probably even the same as homes for sale in Des Moines, Iowa.
Or Des Moines homes for sale. Like it is smart, exactly as you say. So you don't need to shuffle the same words around over and over again. Now,
okay,
I'd like to make sure that we don't forget to talk about blogging, because I recently did some blogging for an agent, and I'd like to tell you, I think I mentioned to you the stats, but I want to talk about it because it was a very simple tactic that had him jump from page 2 to page 1 and, you know, high on the page just from a certain exercise, which I'll explain. But the reason I wanted to bring that up is simply because when you have the opportunity within your website, for example, to say the same sort of thing over and over again, that's a great opportunity to start mixing your words up. So to sometimes say homes for sale first and sometimes say Des Moines first. So not always to say it in the exact same phrasing. When you go and do a Google search, if you put something in quotes, that's when Google will deliver the result with those words exactly in that exact order. But nobody Googles with quotes around it unless they're doing some kind of research. So I would not really worry about that. And I just remembered what I was going to ask you and ask your audience as well, which is, as agents, I certainly hear it happens a lot, but do you ever just get a random phone call from someone who's trying to sell you a Google listing?
Are you kidding me? I get like 7 a day.
Right?
Ugh, and now they've got bots calling me. Oh, please stop it.
So the reason I ask this is because they're trying to say to you, like, this is my favorite thing is, do you want to be at the top of Google? And I think it's just the funniest question, because it's a question that almost implies that the person answering, who, if the person answering says yes, that person doesn't understand that anybody could be at the top of Google for anything. The question is, do you want to be at the top of Google for something competitive? And, you know, if they were selling you keywords like Des Moines real estate, you would probably pay it quite heavily for that, right? And that's often what they're calling about. But the reason I ask the question is just to further explain that that's what the keywords are that we're talking about as we have this conversation, which is the keywords that they're selling you are, well, it's for paid advertisement, but those are considered keywords as well. So when they say to you, do you want to show up at the top of Google for blank, that would be a keyword or a group of keywords or a phrase. And so I just thought I'd throw that example out there for you guys.
That is good. And I appreciate that. So I just want to recap where we're at here. So I promised 3 free ways to get traffic to your website. And so we have talked about the Google listing. Monica says, what do you suggest our main listing should be worded? And I can recap what Dara said about that is start with anything. So start with homes for sale in your town. Monica, the realtor at your brokerage, you know, anything that you have in there, as long as it includes something that you think the people you are trying to attract would use in a Google search term.
And I'll just add to that and say, do Google those terms without your name and ensure that there aren't other listings there, because the easiest way to be the person who shows up in the search result is to be the only person who is showing up. So if nobody else is using realtor, but somebody else is using homes for sale, well, then add realtor instead of homes for sale.
Okay. Be unique.
Be unique. Exactly.
And so then our second free method of getting traffic to your website is using your social media profiles. And so you talked about Facebook, and I think this would work on YouTube.
Everywhere.
Yeah, it works everywhere. So
Instagram.
There's, and we, like when we had our Instagram class in Savvy Agent Club, like the only portion of your Instagram profile that shows up in the search, which is search engine, essentially, it's within Instagram, is like your name, your call name, you know, Heather Savvy Agent, Heather Wright is my name. And then the description. Actually, I don't think anything in the description shows up in the search terms. So if you're like, I'm an amazing realtor in Des Moines, Iowa, blah, 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 all in your description, it doesn't necessarily show up in the results. So Instagram might be a bad example as far as SEO transferring back to Google, probably because it's a slightly newer platform and Facebook is a lot more business friendly today. So you could have SEO on your, not only on your Heather Wright and Associates Facebook business page, but also if you had a Des Moines real estate business Facebook page that had a generic title, that page is probably going to have a lot more opportunity to show up in the search results on Google for whatever term that you're trying to rank for in your SEO.
To bring it back around to your, and bring it back around to what you said about bringing more website traffic, obviously your website URL would need to be in those profiles. So
right. But if they got to your Facebook page, I mean, honestly, I consider that website traffic because it's a page that I own. So even though I don't necessarily own that URL, they're at least getting to my page. That's not the Remax page. They're not going to be distracted by other agents on that page. It's all me.
Exactly.
So, okay. So your Google listing, your social media profile, and then the third free term, which I know you're dying to talk about, is websites. And so agents that I have polled over the last couple of days have a wide variety of websites. Most people are given the opportunity to have a Facebook page with their broker. So
website with their broker.
Yes, I'm probably going to make that now that a website with their broker.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be funny if their broker was like, here's a Facebook page. Okay, so they have broker pages where they probably only have the ability to edit their agent profile and put in some information there. They might have a little bit more editing ability, but not full control over the site. Mm-hmm. A lot of people use lead generation pages, which would be, sometimes I call them out of the box websites, and I have one. I use Conversion. Boomtown is an example. I think Geeky Girls, Commissions Inc., Curator, those would all be lead generation sites that a company does for you. So I don't know how much control I have over the SEO on those actual pages, but I can put a blog on those pages.
Okay, cool.
Whereas on my agent page from my broker, I don't think I can put a blog on that. I think it's just my agent profile that you could edit. And then there are people who have full control over their own site, whether it is Squarespace, WordPress. I heard a couple of other names that now I can't remember what they were. So we have like 3 different types of websites that people have access to, but the most popular is definitely the agent page.
Okay. Well, I want to say a couple of things because it is really difficult to give blanket advice to such a variety of situations. So the first thing I want to say is, in any circumstance where you've been handed something that has canned content where everybody has the same paragraphs of text and you have the ability to edit it, and I can't imagine that any page wouldn't have the ability to change that text, do yourself a favor and make that unique to you. Because one of the main things, and I know lots of people know this, but I'll bring it up in case those watching don't, is that if Google sees the same text over and over again on a bunch of different websites, it's going to completely disregard all of those sites. So if let's say, I'll just give an example, but if, let's say, Remax gave out, 10,000 agent pages and 9,999 of those pages, people didn't change the generic out of the box. If you want to buy a home, there's this, it doesn't come empty. It comes with canned content.
Right.
If those were all identical, it's almost like they cancel each other out and Google doesn't show them because, as far as Google's concerned, and rightfully so, this is nothing new. This isn't valuable because it exists in, not duplicate and triplicate, but whatever the word for 10,000 times over would be.
Right.
So just to clarify my recommendation, very strong feeling about this, is change that canned content. Right. Go and anything you can do to make that unique. I've seen it in agents over and over again. They struggle. You struggle to talk about yourself. I hear that all the time. I have so much trouble talking about myself. You know what? Sit down with your friend and drink a glass of wine and brainstorm. Anything you can say is better than canned content. anything you can say is better than blank, because if there's no text, then there's nothing for Google to search, and therefore nothing for Google to deliver. So,
and you don't necessarily have to talk about yourself. You can talk about your clients. You can talk about your dreams. If you just started real estate today, well, there is nothing to talk about yourself.
But there's a reason that you chose this career. So maybe it's just your passion for good architecture or renovations, or anything is better than
the
nothing.
Experience that you intend for your clients to experience, the experience they'll experience. Good job, Heather, with verbal. So the point is, it doesn't have to be about you, and it probably shouldn't even be. Even if you've been in the business for 9 years, it shouldn't always be about you, because the people who are reading it actually only care about themselves. They don't care about you yet, or possibly ever. But if you do a very good job displaying that you care about them, you might catch their interest.
Mm-hmm. And another factor as well is if you have the opportunity to have listings show up on your site. So we call it IDX here. Is it IDX there as well? So where you would, because, one of the things that we haven't talked about yet is once someone comes to your website, you actually want to keep them engaged as long as possible. You want them to find interesting things to look at and read about. You want them to find listings. You want them to find blog posts. And I don't say this to overwhelm you, like you have to do all of the things. That's not what I'm trying to say. But what I'm saying is that SEO is only beneficial if once you've gotten them to your website or to your social media page, that they then do something. There's no sense in having all this traffic if they then land on your site and go elsewhere. So by creating a place that people want to engage or spend time doing research. So if you've got a website that would have all of the homes for sale in Des Moines, and you've shown up for homes for sale in Des Moines and someone has clicked through to your site, they're going to stick around if you're giving them what they came for. And that is really something that shouldn't be discounted in this whole equation of gain. I mean, at the end of the day, we can talk about SEO all we want and throw around the term SEO, but what you're really looking for is business. You're really looking for people to engage with you and hire you and get you to list their home or help them buy, or develop a relationship that will eventually lead to that, or a referral. So if you haven't built something that gives them what they're looking for, then there isn't any point of having optimized. So, which is why I love reciprocity listings. These IDX plugins give people it's not eye candy, but it's that, it's the thing. People search MLS or realtor.com all the time, right? They want to look inside people's homes. Like, this is what sucks people in, even if they're looking at these things for years before they ever buy.
Right. So, okay. So we have our 3 different types of websites. We have the agent profile, where they can really only edit their profile, maybe a service area, but no opportunity to add blogs. And of course, their broker page will have IDX searchability, but once they start searching for houses, then other agents are going to show up on that page.
Exactly.
So then you have your lead gen website, which actually probably doesn't share a lot of information about the agent or the team, because the purpose of that site, like conversion, Boomtown, et cetera, the purpose of that site is to suck the
contact information.
Exactly. Get that information. So it might, like my website, I think if you attempt to look at 2 pictures, then it will pop up and say, oh, hey, in order to see these pictures, you have to register. And it's, the exchange is, I will let you look at my pictures in exchange for your email address. And so then it sounds like what you're actually recommending is that people, when they're ready and they have the money to do it, because this is not free. I mean, even if you did it yourself, you'd have to buy a domain. You have to probably buy a WordPress, or, you're going to have to pay somebody something to do this, because the World Wide Web is not free. And then set up your own branded website, and then maybe have an IDX plugin like IDX Broker or iHome Finder. I mean, there's a lot of options out there. But if that is not the place that you are at today, that's okay, because you can still optimize your agent page and hope that people call you. I mean, you're probably not, or maybe, Dara, would you say if you're a newer agent and you don't have the budget yet, but you still want to get the business, you understand SEO, and you want to apply that as much as you can to your agent page, would you?
And your social profiles.
And your social, but on your agent page, would you then send people to your Facebook page?
So, I mean, I think everybody, again, I don't think that there's a single answer for this. I think that if you are a newer agent, the primary focus is not appearing to be new. So you want to appear as knowledgeable and as present online as possible, so that nobody knows that you're just starting out or that you don't have a ton of experience.
Sure.
And so I would say, if I had to give a generic answer without knowing someone's particular circumstance, it would be pick the platform that you like the most. So if you like Facebook, then by all means, let that be the hub. I realize that as a new agent, you really need to be careful with how you spend your money. One of my favorite success stories was actually a client of mine who was starting out. He was only a part-time realtor, and we actually built him a series of farm area sites. So they were custom, they were designed for him, but they only cost him like maybe $25 a month. Like it wasn't a huge expense.
Oh.
And in the grand scheme of how much money agents are pulled to spend, it was ideal. And again, you said in this example, like if you know a little bit about SEO. So what he did was he picked, instead of going after the whole city, he went after 5 little neighborhoods.
Okay.
And he went to, it was like, I think he worked for Century 21, and he went to a convention, and he was approached by a woman who was like, oh my God, you're killing it. And he was not killing it. He was just appearing to be killing it because he had this major presence that made him look like he was an experienced, and like his presence was very pervasive in the areas that he was serving. And so it built up. I mean, he's one of the top agents in his office now, but he had to start somewhere, and starting with those small sites that were able to get to the top of Google because we knew what we were doing and because he was targeting something really, really specific.
Okay, so tell me more about farm pages. Tell me, if you were going to do a farm page in Beaverdale where the houses are, I don't know, some people might call them pre-war, post-war. I'm not really sure. We don't really talk like that here in Iowa, but the houses are anywhere from 1920 to 1940-ish. Of course, some before and some after, but the bulk of them are like that. They're really cool architecture. People want to have a Beaverdale brick is what they're called. There's a lot of bungalows. It's sort of the cool place to live. Where
you're totally selling me on this. I would put a video of you talking about Beaverdale right on that homepage.
And I know that you are under contract with a townhouse, and the prices are so much different here. Like you could get a house with 1/3 of an acre lawn, and it's a single family, 2-car attached garage for like $225,000.
Yeah, well, I'll take 3 of those for the price I just paid for a townhouse.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Talk about value here in the heartland.
Yeah. Well, and so is your question, what kind of site would I set up for Beaverdale?
Right. So now knowing that information about Beaverdale, just to kind of give everybody an idea, because people might not, I don't know, like I just feel like it sort of helps give a visual of what you're creating without showing an actual visual. So knowing that information, like what would you use to create a farm site? Is it a site for a listing that I have in that farm? If Beaverdale was my farm, and by farm, anybody who's not clued in on what a farm is, it's a geographical area. So your geographical farm that you are, like it's your area. So you're going to work
the
that
neighborhood
farm,
that you exactly
plant the seed, cultivate the crop, and you're going to be
if you had a bus bench ad, it would be in this area.
Right.
Yeah. The very first consideration in deciding what area to create a farm website for, you can farm an area, but to create a website would be the volume of listings and sales. So here in Vancouver, I mean, real estate is crazy. And I had a guy approach me and say, I want to create a farm area website for a single building. So it was a condo building.
Oh,
and he
sure.
said, and he knew what neighborhood, and he hadn't picked a building. So I went in and I did a bunch of research as to the volume of listings and sales at any given time over the course of the last 6 months I looked at 10 different buildings, because I knew that I could get him to the top of Google for that one building, or, well, we ended up picking a trio of buildings that are all related to each other. But if the listings volume isn't there, and I'll tell you why this is important, if the listing volume and turnover isn't there, then even if you farmed it online, you wouldn't have there wouldn't be the listing volume to support that investment. So so we looked at the amount. Oh, and the reason, sorry, so this is the foundational part of this is you want that IDX search. Like, you want those listings on your farm area site. So that's where I start. That's the heart of a farm area site, is those listings, which is why you need to have a volume of listings. The turnover and the sales volume is for you to have a chance to make your money in that area. So that's one consideration. But the listings themselves is what draws people in. So the reason that this guy wanted to go after a particular building is just because that neighborhood has hundreds of listings at any given moment. And so he was trying to narrow down and become like the expert in this little enclave. Okay. So in Beaverton, I would first look for what is the website provider who will show me Beaverton listings. Like, whether it's an IDX, like, I'm not sure. I know it just works differently here than it works for you, but the concept is the same, because what you want is you want to draw people in and show them what they came for. Okay. And then you've established yourself as that expert. Now, a moment ago, you gave an example of the lead gen website versus the website that kind of gives them everything they want. It actually, to me, is somewhat the same, because the only difference is you're locking down some of the information, but you're still teasing them with listings. And ultimately, I think that's what people are looking for. They're either looking to see how much their house is worth or what their neighbors is selling for, or they're looking because they're interested in buying in that area. But it's the listings that draw them in. It's not the agent themselves. Nobody's going to go and read about your bio. Yeah, exactly. As lovely as you and interesting as you are, it's about the area. So if I was building a site, I would foundationally be about the listings. And then I would say, okay, well, what schools, what shopping centers, what amenities, and I would build pages that bring, again, this is unique content. I'm not copying this from somewhere else. I'm curating this and finding this information and creating, maybe it's a bulleted list of all the stores in the strip mall down the road, or because you just never know. And I have had circumstances where people will Google like dog park in an area, and a realtor's blog post about how they walk their dog at the dog park in this area is the reason that comes up. And it turns into business because then there's something in common. Like, so there's all these different you can just be so much more specific when you're building a farm area site, because these are things that people want to know. They want to know the schools. They want to know the school catchments. They want to know maybe transit. I mean, you would know Beaverton better than me. One day you're going to have to take me to Beaverton.
Beaverdale. So like,
Beaverdale, sorry, Beaverdale.
Surprise. It's not even what you thought it was. It's already incredible.
But you would know, as the agent who's essentially calling themselves an expert in Beaverdale, you would know what information people ask about it, right? Sure. So you just have this opportunity to fill a website with all this information. And these websites, like, in my experience, they're not very expensive to maintain. And the investment that you put in building out the content pays off over time. Unlike paid ads, we're not here talking about paid ads, but if you went and you bought advertising on Google, the moment you turn them off, that advertising is gone. But if you invest in a website that has content about something that people are interested in your business area, then that's like truly an investment. It's not a flyer in the garbage, and it's not an ad that's no longer being paid for. So there's just so much opportunity, in my opinion, with these farm area sites. And if you have a blog on your site, and maybe this is a good opportunity to kind of add a blog conversation to this, because I don't want us to run out of time without talking about the blog.
Well, I'm in charge of the clock, and I'm not going to cut you off. So don't worry. Good.
Excellent. But the interesting thing about the blog is that blogs are an opportunity for your website. Let's assume, for the sake of this conversation, that whoever I'm talking to right this minute has the potential to blog on their site. Okay. Each blog entry is a separate page on your website. But the nice thing about the blogs is that they're not the core content. So your core content would be your homes, active listings, sold listings, about me, contact us. Those are like the, for buyers, for sellers, your typical real estate website content. But then you have this opportunity with the blog pages to talk about the dog park, to talk about the dinner you had in that neighborhood, to talk about a new listing that you have. You have this opportunity in the blog, because there's a date associated with it, to talk about all kinds of things. And what that does is it brings the volume of information that's housed within your website up. As long as you're being unique in what you're saying, it's now unique content for Google to see. And you have this opportunity to touch on things that are not the same old keywords as everybody else is using. So you can also use it very tactically. And I'm going to give you the example because of the success that we recently had with an agent, where he already was ranking relatively well for a handful of things. And he said to me, can you start blogging for me? And what I proposed was essentially very formulaic blog post. We did it 3 times a week. We said essentially the same thing, because the blog posts that we created were for Google, not for the public. And the blog post content referred to a listing, an IDX listing, and linked back to the page within the site. So the blog post would say, Vancouver luxury realtor so-and-so, and the words Vancouver luxury realtor linked to his homepage, has got on his website a brand new luxury home for sale in White Rock. And then luxury home for sale in White Rock is then hyperlinked to the IDX page with the listings. Okay. So we did this over and over again. Every 3 times a week, we were blogging, and we took his page, like where he was, which page he was on, and which position on that page. So let's say page 2, position 3, and we did, I think we had about 10 different keywords. So we took the snapshot of the stats at the outset, and then we blogged 3 times a week. And at the end of the month, we did the same searches. And every single one of those search terms that we had targeted with these blog posts, he had jumped. So all of those search terms, I think with the exception of one, he's now on page 1 for, and they were competitive keywords. So the routine blogging, using the keywords and referring back to those IDX pages, not to the listing itself, because the listing itself will go away, but it's to the general page on that site. And I was blown away by the results because I thought that he would have a really tough slog because of the competitiveness of the terms. And I said to him, this is just an experiment for all of us, because, no matter what we're doing, any of this marketing is just an experiment until it works. And it worked. So there are things, and it was generic. It was 10 minutes of our time,
And so when you're doing a blog, how many words do you recommend as a minimum?
I think we had it as 3 paragraphs, and they were short.
So probably like 300 words?
Not even. It was, and again, this is where we said this a couple of times at the beginning, just try something. Okay. Start with something. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be better than the other people you're competing with. And 99% of realtors are not doing this stuff. That's true. Or they're paying someone else. Like, people are, like, realtors are not taking, and I understand it, that you're in business to go and serve and sell houses, not to go behind the scenes. But if you knew that such a small effort would yield such impressive improvements in your rankings, like, that's totally worth it to me.
That's a great point. We should do like a high five. Yeah, that is an excellent point. So I have 3 categories here of free ways to get traffic to your website, which essentially would then turn into business and money in your pocket. We've got the Google business listing, which is free, and everybody should do that. And if you have one from 5 years ago at a different brokerage, you should update it. Using your social media profiles to make sure that they're optimized, that you're a realtor in your town at RE/MAX, so use the same optimization words as you would for your Google listing in your social media profile. And then you can also use social media pages, like a Facebook page that is maybe a Vancouver luxury real estate would be a good Facebook page for your Vancouver client to use. Then your website, whether you use your agent profile on your broker or franchise, whether it's your broker or your franchise providing you your agent profile page, or you're using a lead gen page that probably allows you to blog, or your own website. So having your pages optimized as much as possible for SEO, but then having blogs on your page, I think that is a pretty golden nugget, a pretty good golden nugget of information there. Yeah, like this coffee didn't even refresh me. I'm so dang tired. I can barely even get my words from my brain out of my mouth.
You're doing an excellent job at recapping. Thank you.
Well, I've got it listed here, and I mean, who knows? People may have dropped in and out, and maybe they're just fast forwarding to the end. I don't know. So I think that your blogs are going to be pretty essential and easy and free. So, and you could even do a video. You could be like, hey, this is me, and I'm at dinner at blah, blah, blah. And here's what I love about this neighborhood and why I chose this restaurant. And, I mean, then you can have that transcribed and turned into a blog, and it's going to be fantastic, and it'll rank on YouTube. Oh my God, your SEO is amazing. And then also included in the website category, but it's not probably going to be free unless you do it yourself, is a farm site, which I think is really interesting to niche down into. Or do you say niche in Canada?
I say niche.
Yeah.
But we can say niche. I'm
from the Midwest, and we say niche here. So, so niche or niche down to whatever smaller geographical area that you want to dominate your business in. So I think these are fantastic tips.
And I think the most important takeaway is there are so many things you can do. So pick one and do it well.
Yep.
And master it. And then go back and pick something else. Don't feel like you have to do all of these things to be successful. You just have to start with something. So don't come away from this feeling, oh my God, there's so much to do. Right. Just pick something that appealed to you. If any one of these things sounded easier than the others, start with that one.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, if no one should be going out and starting with farm sites, like you have to, it's a stairway. You have to start at the first step and step your way up. And don't forget to sell houses along the way, because why are you doing this? And
take, I had this noted yesterday, which is totally not SEO related, but it is the number one thing that I see people or see agents forgetting to do, is to do some good contact management. As you have business over the years, keep people's contact info. I can't tell you the number of agents who are like, oh, in my filing cabinet at home, I could probably sort through it and tell you, but some of the people have died and moved, and like, of a good business having the contact information of your clients. And I know you feel that way, so I thought I would mention it, since I think
I went to a training at my Remax office. I think it was last week or the week before. And it's rare that I go to the trainings for whatever reason. So of course I walk into this room, and I sell a ton of houses every year. I'm in the top 5% of agents in my town. And I'm looking around this room, and I felt like the new kid, like, oh my God, who are all these people? I don't know anybody that's here. And so, as I do, I go into a room and I start making friends. And so I'm like, oh, hey, what do you use for your CRM? Blank looks like, oh God, keep asking me about CRMs. And it was so interesting to me, because nobody around me used a CRM. So that contact management is very, very difficult if you're weeding through old files or papers. I mean, I have a gigantic file cabinet here in my office, and I don't ever open it unless it's to throw something else in it. So once you're in the file cabinet, it's rare that you come out of the file cabinet. So yeah, I would definitely recommend a CRM for contact management, although that is probably
it's the whole other conversation.
It's a whole other conversation.
But I thought it was really saying.
Yes, no, I agree with you 1000% on that. So when it comes to SEO, is there anything that was burning in your mind that you wanted to make sure that we talked about? I know I sent you a list of things that we would talk about, and then it seems I immediately derailed from that plan and just started asking you questions based on what you were saying. So
hopefully it was still very informative.
Well, here's a question that I had written down. How would I know if I had good SEO or bad SEO?
All right, that's a really good question. And I had written down, but we didn't touch on it yet. And what, in an ideal world, you can actually look at the statistics of how many people are finding you. But that isn't necessarily the case in many of the examples we've given with brokerage sites and so on. Mm-hmm. If you have the opportunity to install some stats tracking on any of the platforms that you're using currently, install it now, even if you don't care, because you can never go back and collect data that didn't get collected in the first place. So I always recommend, for example, Google Analytics, which is free, is if you install that code on your website, even if you don't look at it for 5 years, you'll have been collecting that data, which will give you fantastic intel in terms of what people have been finding you for. And if you make a change, then you can see a spike or a drop, but ideally a spike in the number of people visiting your site or the search terms that they've used before landing on your website. So I don't know if that answers your question, because I don't think that you can, I mean, you certainly can't, there's no way to stats track for Facebook or Twitter or any of those things. But if you have the opportunity to collect stats as a benchmark before making changes, I would absolutely recommend that.
Okay, so I'm actually tagging, well, not tagging, I'm commenting on our post here or on our Facebook Live to be sure to add Google Analytics to your page if you can, with a link to Google Analytics.
Excellent.
Which is not the easiest to figure out, because most things Google related are not user friendly. Apple could teach them a lot. Sorry, all you Android fans. Sarah, I know that's you. But so, okay. We talked about blogs. Oh, do you hear that? We must have a package being delivered because my dog is going bonkers. So I left him upstairs. My office is in the garden level of our house. And yeah, apparently that plan was not that great. He should be in his kennel because he's naughty.
He did not get the notification that we were going to be on Facebook Live.
Oh, he got it. He just.
Oh, okay. He doesn't care. Yeah, fair enough.
Okay, so here's something that we can touch on real quick. So if I write a blog post about why it's great to live in Beaverdale, should I put all of the words in that post? So, or it's keyword stuffing is essentially what I'm talking about. You know, where you've seen Iowa real estate, Iowa realty, Iowa, like, wow, that's really overdoing it. In people will put it on the footer of their website in different places at the end of a post on a blog post. So,
and if you get caught by Google doing that, then you're going to end up losing your rankings really quickly. I think that the best way, there's always two parts to any kind of optimization. One is that Google is going to find you, and then the second is that the person who found you is going to be reading your stuff. So I would give as much weight to something being informative and well written as I would to the keywords. And so the first thing I would do is write something someone would want to read.
Okay.
And then go back and look at it from an outside perspective and say, did I use the keywords enough? And enough is all relative. I'm sure there are exact stats on it, exactly how many times, blah, blah, blah. But again, do something rather than nothing. So go back through it and think, in circumstances where you use the word that or this or something generic, could you beef up that sentence with the keyword so that the sentence still reads normally, but that if you read it out loud, it wouldn't sound like you were keyword stuffing.
Okay.
And you don't need to say it 17 times for Google to get the picture.
Okay.
And we didn't even, in this whole conversation, we still haven't even touched on page title and description and some of the much more technical aspects of SEO. We're talking much more on the organic parts of it. But in any page that you create on your site, if you have this kind of control, and any site that you own, like a WordPress site or one of those boxed sites, will typically give you this power. Mm-hmm. And is that you have the control over what your page title is. And I'll tell you what the page title is for those who don't know. Most people don't know that term. When you Google something, there's the big blue text, and then there's the black text that's smaller, that's the description. The big blue text is your page title. The small black text is the meta description. So if you have the opportunity in whatever pages you're creating or editing on your website, if you have the opportunity to edit those things, that is an excellent place to ensure. Just double check, and it sometimes generically will come up already well titled. But if it's not, so I'll give you an example. If I add a listing, the websites that I build for realtors, if I added a listing, a particular home, the automatic page title would be like 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom listed on, and then it would give me a hyphenated date and like completely useless information with 12 photos or something. So I would change that immediately to house for sale, and then the address, and then the city, because people Google addresses all the time.
Right.
And now that address will show up as the page title, which means that Google will be like, oh, that's what this page is about, and is more likely to show it as a search result. And I'm sorry for the tangent, because I know it's a little bit more advanced tactic, but I think it's important to mention that it's not just about the text on the page. It's also about the announcement you make, which is that page title, to say, Google, this is in 60 characters or less, or 70 characters or less, this is what this page is about.
Okay.
Okay. I think you asked me a moment ago if there was like one major takeaway from an SEO perspective, what it would be. And if you didn't, I'd like to say it, because I have a great one for you.
Do it.
Which is essentially the same conversation we've had over and over again on every topic that we've touched on, which is use more description than less. Be a little bit more specific than generic. Meaning, if you have an opportunity to, at the very top of your website, use your name and the city and the brokerage, do that instead of just your name. Or, again, any of your profiles, use the descriptors that somebody who wasn't in a local area and didn't know you would help them understand what it is and where you work. Because it's such an often forgotten thing to add that descriptor. So every piece of your web presence, Heather, tells me that you are serving Des Moines. And I will never forget that, nor will I ever mistake your pages for serving an area that you don't. And that's well done. And so if our viewers can take that away and take a look with fresh eyes of their own profiles and their own presence and be like, oh, here I've got my name plastered all over everything, but I don't say what neighborhood. This is like kind of an example, maybe a silly one, but I was at a squash club yesterday, and there was a poster, and it was a poster for a squash tournament coming up, such and such dates, and it names a club that I've never heard of, and nowhere on the poster did it say what city the tournament was in. But it's one of those things we forget, right? Because you're like, oh, well, I'm making a poster, and it's about me, and it's about my club, and everybody should know. But it was not a local club, and they mailed their poster out to clubs in other neighboring cities, and you know what I mean? So look at your marketing material, look at your online presence with that perspective, because I guarantee if everybody went and looked, they would surprise themselves with how they've forgotten that detail in a lot of circumstances.
Excellent tip. Dara, you never fail to deliver. I like it a lot.
Thanks.
What about if I'm writing a blog, and I'm asking this mainly for my own personal education, but for those watching, you get to learn too. So I use Yoast as an SEO plugin when I'm writing a blog, and most times I like it, but sometimes I wonder, is this really helping me or not? So would you recommend Yoast?
I like Yoast. Yoast gives you a really nice little checklist of the things that when they talk about, like, Google considers 200 different things. Well, Yoast is going to tell you about like the top 7 or 8 of them. Right. But I like Yoast because it's a reminder of the fact that you didn't use your keywords in the text, or it just grounds you and centers you back to the optimization portion, because it's easy to go and write several paragraphs about something. Right. But we forget, because we're speaking so casually, we forget to go back and make sure that it's in a way that Google will know what you're talking about, in a way that Google will know who to deliver those search this as
Gotcha.
a search result too. So I do like Yoast. Yoast is a plugin specifically for WordPress.
Mhm.
You can get a paid version of it, which the price recently went up. I actually didn't renew my Yoast plugin on a few different websites because the price changed, and I was not happy about that.
Oh, I use the free version, and it tells
I use
me
the free
every
one.
single time I have too much passive voice, and I don't know how to correct that. So I usually just have
Yeah.
to rewrite the whole dang thing.
But if you have the Yoast plugin, this is in that plugin is where you have the opportunity to control the page title and the description. On a blog, typically your page title is the title of the blog,
Right.
but the page title, you could enhance that because it wouldn't necessarily make sense for your blog post to include the word Des Moines, for example.
Right.
But it would, sorry, for your blog title, but the page title could absolutely have that keyword in there.
True.
So you could go, you know, it kind of depends on how you've worded it, but there's the appeal, like the way you title something to appeal to the public to get them to click. And then there's the way that you title something that makes sure that Google knows what you're talking about. And you have to balance between the two, and Yoast is an awesome tool for that.
Okay. Well, good to know. I guess I'll keep using it. Although sometimes, I mean, it's not easy. None of this stuff is easy. It's, you know,
it's time consuming, and you don't get the immediate feedback that it's working.
Right.
That's the frustration, right? So if there was one thing that I would say with Yoast is make sure that that page title is something that you would want to have show up on Google.
Okay.
If you do nothing more, page title.
Page title. Got it. I think we've talked about tools and resources enough to confuse the audience on tackling SEO themselves. And if they wanted to outsource their SEO efforts, is that something you could do for them, or would you recommend other types of services?
That's a great question. I don't, the only kind of SEO that I do is building these farm area websites.
Okay.
And I guess I started blogging for this one guy, but I wouldn't, while I'm here to talk about SEO, I don't like run an SEO agency. So what I would recommend would be to get some quotes. You know, you're typically not looking, if you're going to hire out to an SEO like agency, I've never seen a quote come back at less than $300 a month. So it's a pretty big investment. So
that's pretty cheap, $300 a month. Like,
and that's like the lowest I've ever seen. It is pretty cheap, but only if you're getting results.
mm-hmm.
Otherwise that's quite a lot of money to be spending on top of already having a website, and who knows what else is going on. So I honestly, I'm not sure that I can give a generic advice on this. It's almost like a case-by-case basis conversation, because it's where are your marketing dollars best spent. You know, if 90% of your business comes from referrals, I would rather see you spend that money on your past clients than on, you know, efforts that may or may not yield the right results, because it's not just about optimization, it's about the website too. So there's this rabbit hole that you can end up going down when you start talking
about down it right now.
Totally, exactly. And so I prefer to tell people to spend less money and to do one thing at a time, because all marketing is an experiment, and you want to do one thing and see if it brings you anything. You want to do the next thing and see if it brings you anything, as opposed to going gangbusters and spending thousands on a website and thousands on optimization when the return isn't going to be immediate, and there are other things that you could be doing. Like I would rather see, if somebody was like on the fence because they didn't necessarily have the budget and they wanted to know what's the best bang for their buck, I'd rather see them hire a virtual assistant who has some knowledge, who then goes and plugs away and does a variety of computer or online things, than going and hiring an SEO company to the tune of thousands of dollars a year. Do you know what I mean? Like, I tend to not want people to spend money, because I think there's no silver bullet. Basically.
And that is basically why I started Savvy Agent and Savvy Agent Club, because agents spend a lot of money wastefully, and they can save money by exactly what you just said. So girl, you are preaching to the choir. Preach. Okay. So what if somebody wanted to get in touch with you after this live? If they're like, oh, I need to be friends with Dara.
Well, I have a relatively unique name, so Dara Sklar, and you can search for me. I'm mostly on Facebook, and I I know this is not what we talked about at all, but what I currently am doing with most of my time is teaching people how to be paperless and digitally organized in their computers. So if that is a topic that interests you, then I'm going to be an interesting person to follow, but I'm also kind of friendly. So you can track me down. My business is called Realty Support, and
Okay.
you'll see that in the in my profile as well. And, you know, most of the business that I do, like, I'm here to share information with you. Most of the business I do is actually just locally. So I wouldn't necessarily be like the go-to person to be your service provider, but I certainly knew enough to be able to come on live here and help educate your audience, and hopefully you as well. So,
Well, and you are my friend, so I really appreciate you helping me today
I'm sure
navigate.
this won't be our last live. We've got so many things to talk about.
I know. I mean, every time we get together, it's like pages and pages of notes. So I love chatting with you, and hopefully everybody else has enjoyed chatting with you. We'll tag Dara's page in the post so that you can just click on that and get in touch with her page. And guys, thanks so much for watching this. I hope you learned a little bit. Dara, thanks for joining us, and go sell some houses. We'll talk to you guys soon.